Hi everyone, welcome back to another TouchDesigner tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how to make these three different systems that are all based on the same technique. Before I start, I want to mention this video by Paqueta 12. He did a while ago, like 3 years ago. He shares here a similar technique, but what I'm gonna show you today is gonna be different in many ways. So you can also check out his video as an example of a different way of doing this system, but I'm also gonna take it in a few different directions from what he did. But you should check him out. You probably already know who he is. The project file for this tutorial will be available on my Patreon for you to download. So if you wanna just go right in and play around with the parameters, you can get it from there. But if not, we can start. I'm going to delete everything and let's start with a constant like always, and here I'm gonna just have my parameters like my resolution on X, my resolution on Y, and let's have a reset parameter, and I can connect that to a null, and we can set the resolution to 1080 by 1080, and I'm gonna use a keyword in for my reset like here. So if I press 1, it's gonna reset, and I can change this name to null data. Okay, so first off, we're gonna create the texture that we're gonna use to have all of these different splitting effects. So to create that, let's start with a rectangle. And I want it to cover just half of the texture, so I'm going to change this to fraction, set the height to 1, and justify it left. Also very important that the aliasing is, you turn off at the aliasing, and we can change the resolution to our texture, our parameter resolution that we set here, and let's set this to near just so I can see the sharp edge there, and this can be 32-bit mono. You can see that if we have anti-aliasing on, you have this gray line in the middle, and we don't want that. Turn it off, and now here if I transform it, you can either rotate it, but also translate it in X and Y, right? Let me also change the extent of this transform from 0 to hold. So now it's always half of it is white and half of it is black. And you have these three different parameters you can change, right? Like height, horizontal translation, and rotation. So we're gonna move this around using noise. But first, this is only a black and white texture, right? What we want is a texture with half of it pointing in one direction, or having the information of a vector pointing in one direction, and the other half pointing in the opposite direction. So to get that, this is only like a mask. Right now it's only black and white. So I'm gonna use a constant here. There's just gonna be 1 pixel. And let's use 32-bit mono. And this, with a function, can be used to convert from an angle to a vector, right? With basic trigonometry, if you use the cosine for the horizontal component and the sine for the vertical component, you can get that. And this constant, I'm gonna set it with the same angle as in this transform. So I'm gonna grab it from here, and this is gonna be the value. I'm gonna then also change this function from 32-bit mono to 32-bit RG. And now you can see, if I turn this into a point, when you can barely see that, but there's a point pointing in the same direction that is perpendicular to this line, right? And if I change it around to a different angle, you can see it's always that. Cool. So now I want half of the texture to point this way and the other half to point the opposite way. So I'm gonna use a math here before the transform to change the range. Instead of 0 to 1, it's gonna be -1 to 1. So now this side is -1 and this side is 1. So if I multiply these together, we're gonna get what we want. Let's change this fixed layer to 1, so it has this resolution, and change this to nearest pixels. And the pixel format should be RG as well, and there you go. We have this texture. Oh, you can see there's some weird artifact in here. There's some interpolation because this transform is interpolating a little bit when it rotates. We need to, basically every operator in the system is gonna have to be in nearest pixels. There you go, it's no longer there, and if we see there's 2 points that are perpendicular to this line, which is exactly what we wanted. And okay, I'm also going to use a math here to, you have to compensate if this, right now this is a square, but if this were to be a different aspect ratio like this, you have to compensate for all the displays in our transforming we're gonna do. You have to compensate for the aspect ratio. So to do that, I'm gonna change here the green channel. The range, I'm gonna change it to the aspect ratio. I'm gonna just get it right here by dividing the resolution in width by height, and that's that. That's fixed. I'm gonna put this back to the square for now, but just so you know why that's there. Okay, and let's see, that's our, I'm gonna call this split texture, split text. Okay, now we have this whole setup that if we transform this gets updated, and we have this texture that we can use to displays or whatever, right? Okay, so let's automate the process of this changing on its own after every so often. So first, let's get a noise function that generates these 3 values, right? It's 3 values which we can generate with the 3 channels that we get in a normal texture. I could use a noise chop here, but I prefer just sticking with tops. I'm gonna just get a 1x1 noise and set it to RGBA. Turn off monochrome. I can put this in random, and there you go, it's random noise. And here I need to, let me set the offset to 0, and now the X and Y translation do go from -0.5 to 0.5, but the rotation is like it's in angles instead of radians or something, so it needs to be really big. So I'm gonna use a math here to multiply by 360, but I only want to multiply the blue channel, so I'm gonna use here a channel mask, the channel mask. So only the blue channel is gonna multiply, and I'm gonna change the color of this one to blue just so that I remember that this is only affecting the blue channel. And now I can get a null here and call that split data. And using a top to chop, here I have my translation in X, translation in Y, and rotation in Z. Here I'm gonna set this to immediate. And let's use that information right here. Yeah, and all right. And there you go. Now you can see that if I change the seed, we get a different split. Okay, now we're gonna add here like a clock system, so this changes every so often. Here you can use, there's a lot of ways of doing this, like a ramp or an LFO. I'm gonna use another just top setup with feedback. So I'm gonna just create a feedback loop that every frame adds a little bit, and it's counting up from 0 to 1, and when it gets to 1, it's gonna reset again, and it's gonna keep ramping again and resetting again. So let's start with a constant, and let's do a math. And this constant is gonna be again 1 by 1, and there's with mono, and this math, I'm just gonna multiply by a small value. Let's say 1 divided by 16. And you can change this. This is gonna change how often the split gets updated to a different one. I'm gonna color this pink so I remember this one can be changed, and we can do a feedback that is just going to add if you can see it just starts going on, but it's going on forever. Let's also use here my reset parameter. I can reset it. So we don't want it to go forever. And I can use a threshold set to less or equal than 1. So when this gets to 1, this turns on, right? And when that turns on, I'm just gonna subtract it from the current value. So subtract here. Alright, so I'm gonna drag this to the feedback, and you can see it's working now. It's ramping up and resetting, ramping up and resetting. And also I'm gonna add here a top to, because this instant trigger that is happening every time it resets is going to be helpful for us later. I'm going to say to immediate as well, and I'm going to call this split trigger. And we can get rid of all the other channels. Okay, so now this program where we need something to control the seed of this, I'm going to make another feedback to create a counter. Let's also add here another constant 1 by 1 mono, and with a feedback that's not a feedback. And we should also set this to black. Also, let's use our reset here, reference, and this is just gonna add this threshold value. And there you go. And let's add null. That's gonna be called counter, and use a top to immediate as well. Very important that you set all of this to immediate. so everything remains in sync with each other. And this is going to be just called count, and we can get rid of every other channel, and there you go, and it's ramping up. And then we can use that to drive the seed for this noise, and it's going to be changing. And now if we change this value in this math, we can change how often it changes. Like 8 by 6 is way faster, but let's keep it at 16 for now. Okay, we have that setup done, and now there's a few more things left for our preprocessing. Let's an edge, and this edge can be 8-bit RGBA, and let's use a math here to have it be rounded into an integer using ceiling, so that we don't get any blurry in the lines that you can get once in a while. I don't know if you can, if we're gonna get one, but you can. And also, again, important, this is set to nearest pixel. And that's gonna be our edge. Let's call this a null edge. Let's also get our image that we're gonna transform. I'm gonna use this one that's by default here, this flower. We need to fit it to the resolution that we're gonna work in, and this fit, I'm gonna set it to fit outside, so there's no transparent parts, and that can be another null base image or im. Okay, cool. Okay, that's it for now. We're gonna add some other nodes here in a second, but this is everything we need to start with the other setups. Okay, so now the first one, we're gonna make ourselves a UV map using 2 ramps. So this first one should be the size of our texture, and let's see, try to be mono, and we can copy and paste it, and this one should be vertical, and then use a reorder. And we can set the green output to the second input, and this should be in 32RG, or UV ramp, and we can use this information from our speed to add to that, and then use that new UV map to remap our image, right? So I'm gonna select this texture, so just so I don't have a lot of wires here, it's cleaner. And let's use a feedback that I'm gonna reset with this reset, and we're gonna just add to it using this texture. This is probably too large right now, so let's use a math, and we can multiply by some small value like 0.01, and let's see what this does. Now, well, first let me multiply by a negative value, and let's see. I'm gonna drag it to the feedback, so it's now connected. Now if I open this up with a point viewer, you can see it's doing something, and it looks very similar to what Paqueta did in his video. And you can use this for instancing or whatever you want. It looks cool on its own, but we're gonna do something different here. Let's turn this back around to a positive value. You can see it stops making sense to look at it in this viewer, but we can use this information to remap our base image. So let's use another select right here with our image, and we can remap it. Now it looks pretty messed up, and you can see there's a lot of transparent panels. We can fix that by using here the extension to repeat or mirror, whichever you prefer. And also, you can tell after a while the image gets completely screwed up. You can tell what was there anymore. These values get really big and spread out. And we don't really want that. So to remedy that, we're gonna add at the end here a cross that's gonna cross it back with the original UV map. So every time it's like getting dragged back to the original state, right? And so let's drag this to the feedback. So now this is our entire loop. And you can see this is very strong. So let's decrease it a little bit. So every time it gets dragged around, and you can change this cross parameter so that it's stronger or weaker. But that's cool. That's the first system. Very tiny. This looks like a seahorse or like a duck. And here I'm gonna start adding some other nodes over here. After multiplying, we have this line. Right now it's straight, but you can actually play around with this texture, with the division of it, by using a displace. Let's use displace here with some noise. And this is gonna change the output to only noise and connect this. Let's set this to not be monochrome, and this displays right now by default it looks at red and blue, and it should be red and green. And now we can just decrease the weight to be more subtle. We can increase the period or the harmonics, and you get this more organic looking line that looks more like a split. And you can see it's a different kind of texture if you wanted that. And you can also right now these values are completely random, right? But you can actually limit some of them. So let's use a limit here. You see what I mean? Let's do a limit, and the limit has this quantization tab. So I'm gonna quantize, but only the angle for now. So I'm gonna make it so this only affects the blue channel. I'm gonna make it blue so I know it only affects blue. And if I quantize the value, let's say round, it's going to limit it so that you can only choose from a certain amount of different angles, right? So if I set this to 1 divided by 3, it will only have 3 different angles, and you can see it creates a different type of effect. Instead of being all random, it creates this geometric pattern, right? And as you may be thinking already, you can also limit the position, because right now it's random, right? So we can do that with a limit. let's see, only affects the red and green. I'm gonna make it yellow, so I know it's only red and green. And let's quantize again this brown, and we can say like, let's say 0.5, no, 0.5, and you can see now the splits are only center either right on the center or straight top or right or left or bottom, right? If I increase this frequency, let's also move this a little bit here. If I increase the frequency, you can see, let's increase it a little bit more. You can see it's always here, 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 right? Again, a different type of effect. You can play around with that, and also you can, after the limit, add a math, and you can even multiply it by a smaller amount so it's closer to the center of the frame, right? So you can play around with all of this. Oh, this math should also not touch the blue channels, or only red and green. So you can play around with those, or bypass all of these three and get something completely random, right? Especially for this first one, you can get some pretty patterns, right? Like looking inside of a diamond or something. Okay, cool. System, let's sit back. That's the first one. Let's build up the second one, because instead of adding to a UV map, we can use this texture to displace our image, right? So I'm gonna copy these selects, because I'm gonna use them again, and I'm gonna use another select to get this edge. So now let's start our feedback. That's gonna take again here our reset, and we can displace using our texture. Let's change this. Let's use a very small value. We can even, I found a value that always looks good is like taking whichever one of these is largest and just using the inverse of that, so 1 divided by the resolution. And we can displace it. Let's see what happens. Oh, it doesn't work because the displace, again, by default looks on red and blue, and we can change that to green. And our information here, our vectors, are centered on 0, so we should change that to 0. Also, I'm seeing here a black line that shouldn't be there. Like if I change the viewer, oh, it's gone. Yeah, okay, sorry. And now we can reset it and see what happens. Let me turn this one on, off, and get this one. And you can see it's getting displaced. It looks pretty cool, but after a while you start completely losing the image, right? Like the same issue that happened here. And you can kind of be happy with this effect, but a way to kind of try to keep the information from the original image is that when we're displacing, we're kind of like pulling the texture apart from this center line that is the middle of our split, right? So we're pulling this direction and pulling this direction from this line. So what if we replace that line in the middle with the information from our image, right? We have this edge that we can multiply with our image, and using an under, place the displace texture under this line. So now if I drag this to our feedback, let me change the viewer. You can see this is still getting this cool, weird effect, but over time you still kind of keep the same color in the same areas. Also, you can tell this is getting blurrier over time. This is because the displays, because we are displacing this along diagonal and angle lines, there has to be some interpolation. We can use nearest pixels and it looks different, but you can tell now the lines between the splits aren't like perfectly perpendicular to the split itself. It's probably fine, right? And maybe there's a way to do this with the other technique I showed in my data machine tutorial to get like a better rounding, but I haven't tried that. Maybe you should give it a go. But for now, this is good. And again, we can play around with changing the displays of the split, all of that. Okay, that was our second system. This one looks like a fish. You can see its fins. Okay, cool. Now the third one, let's try to make it so that this image appears to be cracking and underneath is another layer of that image. So I'm gonna copy and paste these selects. I'm gonna use them again. And again, I'm gonna have a feedback that gets reset with this reset. And now instead of pulling apart the texture with this new information in the middle, I want to pull it apart with nothing in the middle. I want to have empty space. And to do that, I'm gonna take this edge and invert it using a math. Yeah, you can just change the range instead of 0 to 1 to 1 to 0. There you go. So it's empty in the middle. I'm gonna multiply our feedback with that. So it always has that crack in the middle, and we can displace it so it pulls open. I'm gonna displace it again. Oh, something I forgot to show is that this one, if you change this value to something bigger than this, like that, it's going to look completely different and pretty abstract. Pretty cool if you like that. You can play around with it. And turn this under again. I can change the color to white to remember, or not this one, to white to remember. I can turn this off and on. Very different, right? But for this one, I'm gonna copy this math, because for this one we actually want to only use this, because we're pulling it apart and we want only empty space in the middle. We can't allow the feedback value, the displace value, to be too high, or you're gonna get this weird artifact that here look cool, but here will mess up the effect we want to achieve, right? So let's displace, and again, this is gonna be the inverse of the resolution, and this should be green and center at 0. Let's see what that does. Oh yeah, I haven't dragged it around. Look at that. There's something. We can also turn this into mirrors again, so it doesn't become blurry. And it looks cool. That looks cool. But again, same as always, eventually you lose everything. That sounded very dark. But what we want is that the original image appears as a new layer under this split, right? And remember, you can't like always put it on there because it's gonna be pulling away from it, and you would get something similar to this, right? So what we're actually gonna do is every time this split changes, so every time it's done pulling apart, it's gonna, instead of displace it, you're gonna use that frame to actually put this split image over the original image. And we can use a switch here to switch between those. Only that one frame where this split is gonna change. Let's plug this in this order. First the displace and then the over. And we already have this right here that tells us when that split happens, right? So we can grab that, let me select this and grab this, and that's gonna be our switch. And we can drag this into our feedback. And you can see if we look at the display, it looks kind of weird, but if we look at the over, that's what we wanted. Now it opens up, and underneath is the original image again. Okay, this one looks like a penguin, right? Like skating on ice. It's like leaning forward. That's cool. Now let's start the three systems, but let's also do something extra here so that this can have some lighting, some like fake shadows, so it looks like it has depth. Now to do that, we're gonna run a different feedback loop that's gonna be in sync with this one. That instead of displacing an image, we're gonna use this edge to make shadows. So I'm gonna grab the edge, the select here, and let's do some math. I'm gonna first deselect. I'm gonna change the pixel format to mono because we don't need the other channels, and let's change the math here. Let's gonna invert it, change the range. Now this is black, and now instead of having empty space that expands, we're gonna have black space that expands as well. And let's put that into a feedback, and it should be again reset with this, and let's use a displace, and it should be this exact same, because these have to be in sync. It should be this exact same value, so I'm gonna just select it from there. And actually before that feedback, I need to be always multiplying with the split. And now if I just put the displays on the feedback, oh, this displays again red and green and center is 0. You can see it's growing and it's breaking away, but eventually it becomes black, so we need to be always adding a little bit of value here. And because we're gonna be adding, we need to add a limit so it doesn't go over 1. Basically, I'm gonna clamp it between 0 and 1, and that's our shadow. Let's put this. No, that's gonna be called shadows, like Sonic shadows. Then we can drag that to the feedback, and now, okay, that looks like something. Let's also change this to nearest pixel so it doesn't become blurry. Now, changing this math changes how often the other lines stay. That's pretty fast. Let's put it right there. And already I can use this to multiply with our texture. Let's multiply. And we need to change this to input 1 so it has color. Let's see. There's something weird going on here. It's like they're out of sync or something. And that's happening because, as you remember, we have this switch. So every once in a while when this split changes, it doesn't display. So that means this over time becomes slightly behind with respect to this one. Right, it's going to getting ahead of it. So we need to actually get another switch like this one. I can actually copy this one. And remember, this is first displays and then not displays. So let's first the displays and then the not displays. And we're kind of like doing the same, just simulating the same thing so that this one doesn't run ahead. And oh, shouldn't do that like that. Okay, and now let's look at it. Now it looks good, but it doesn't. If you look really close, you can see there's still some weirdness going on around the edges. And a solution I found for this is, instead of multiplying here directly from the over, we actually have to multiply from the switch. I'm gonna select here those do not have this ugly table, but of course remember the switch at the end doesn't have anything on there, so we have to put the image again, but I can grab it from. Oh, let's grab it from here. I have to put the image under it. I can use an over. And now we can multiply, and now it looks good, right? Now they're in sync and it looks great. And now, well, let's do a little bit more. This is like basic shadows, like just they look dark. The newer ones look dark and they get lighter all the time. Let's use here a math. I'm gonna invert it again with a 1, 0, and you can also try doing this if you like it, but I'm gonna use it here. I'm gonna blur the original one with inversion and multiply these two together, and let's increase here the blur a little bit, and you can see you get these blurry edges but only inside of each split. And if we invert them again, you'll see that this kind of look like this can look like shadows, right? So now we can, instead of multiplying with that, multiply with these new ones again. Oh, this shouldn't be here. Like that. And look at that. Looks cooler, right? It looks like it has a real texture. And if you change this 0 to something that's more negative, they become more dramatic. They look cool, right? Okay, this one looks like a musket, like an old musket with like a bee here. Okay, and I think that's it. So I think there's pretty a good amount of parameters to play around with. You can again change your quantization if you want. For example, divide it by 4. We are gonna only have orthogonal splits. That can be fun. And changing here your other quantizations, and now it's only like a 3x3 grid. Looks pretty weird. Experiment around. Hope you enjoy it. Please, if you make something with this, send it to me or tag me if you upload it. I just so I can see it. I love seeing what you can make. And again, the file is in my Patreon if you want to check it out. And thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.